And as a water supplier, I just want to pass on my sympathies to the businesses and residents of the district. It's not something that I certainly don't really want to be in this situation, but you deal with the cards you're given. And for now, the focus is trying to fix this as quickly as possible. So the situation we have is we've now been issued a compliance order from Te Mara Arawai. It addresses three things. One, to deal with the 2 mile reservoir and the non-compliance with a protozoa barrier. The second one is to do with Kelvin Heights, to get that distribution system to a compliant to Te Mara Arawai satisfaction. And the third is a communication plan, which we have to have ready by 5 o'clock this afternoon. So my focus at this point in time is meeting those three requirements of the compliance order as quickly as possible, and that is the focus that I will certainly be directing this organisation to do. So for that focus to happen, one, the communication plan will be out by 5 p.m. today, and it has to be to the satisfaction of Te Mara Arawai. The Kelvin Heights situation, Simon here, our technical operations manager, will be meeting with the regulator to see how and what we have to do to get the Kelvin Heights intake to their satisfaction. We have isolated it from the 2 mile distribution already, and we will be asking the regulator what needs to be done to get that in the compliance system and lift the boil water notice off the people of Frankton, Kelvin Heights and Handley Farm. The third, which is the protozoa barrier for 2 mile, I've instructed the team that I want a plan by the end of next week with timings, so I know exactly what is going on and when it will be done, and that will be communicated to the community. If I get an action plan earlier, it will be given communicated to the community by then earlier as well. What we can do in the meantime is continue to boil water. We are investigating tankers as we speak. I've talked with, communicated with QLDC to see if we can borrow their tankers as well. That is happening as we speak right now. You have to continue to wash your hands, practice good hand hygiene, and if you do feel sick, please go see a medical doctor. I just want to touch on communications for the media. Please keep using the regular channels we have. I think you've all got my phone number. I've talked to a few of you this morning. Keep that up. I'm happy to take any questions or any further inquiries you will have. The 2 mile one, I suspect, will take a little bit longer than the other two to rectify, which I know for businesses and especially like the hospital and patients there, it's probably not the best news they want to hear. So I'll invite the CE and the operations manager to come forward. So that's Tony and Simon, and I'll open up to questions.
Now, Lewis, given that you've got a protozoa barrier in other locations and the cost is already in the long-term plan, why do you need any time at all to put in these missing barriers?
So the barriers, so for 2 mile, we've got two options. One's a membrane filter and one's a UV. So the UV is probably the option we're probably going to go with because it's the quicker one to install. Now, we've got to be clear here. The UV will not eliminate the risk for a boil water notice. There are cases where the water turbidity or the clarity of the water will be too high, so UV will not actually be effective in those situations, so a boil water notice will have to come on. So we're in the process. We've been talking with suppliers for the last 3 days about getting that sort of kit down here as quickly as we possibly can and plug it in and get it up and running.
So the other type of filter takes longer?
Takes a lot longer and costs considerably more, but it is more effective and probably what you consider a permanent solution.
Because the UV doesn't kill these organisms, it just sterilises them.
It eliminates them, but like I said, if the clarity of the water decreases, becomes more cloudy, let's say, if the effectiveness of the UV doesn't.
What's the cost of the two solutions, and why didn't you put them into all the treatment stations?
I'll hand that over to Simon, the cost at the stage. Yeah.
So I guess the cost for the fast track solution, we don't understand yet. We're still working with suppliers, as Mayor Lewers mentioned previously. But for the permanent solution for 2 mile, we were estimating about $30 million for that investment. It's significant. And what's driving up that cost and pushing us towards membrane filtration as the preferred long-term solution is the presence of lake algae. People need to be aware of the fact that our lake, well, all of our deep water lakes are affected by Lindavia intermedia, and that causes some nuisance in the network.
What's the short term, what's the best case scenario here in terms of returning to normal, and what's the worst case scenario?
Best case is we get that UV system as quickly as possible.
What time frame?
We'll find out. I've instructed the staff to give me a time frame by the end of next week.
You talked about months this morning on the radio.
Yeah, that's probably a worst case scenario in months. Yeah, I've got to be open with you, because getting that piece of kit down here and installed on the 2 mile site, that is a tight site, and that's probably, when you ask about our investment program, when you look at, we've got 6 other non-compliant, when you talk about protozoa barriers, this was probably the most difficult site out of those 6.
So Wanaka, the whole of Wanaka doesn't have this.
Yeah, and there's many communities and many councils across this country that don't have this barrier.
Do you feel like we've been used as a test case?
Look, the regulator's been around for a year now. I think excuse the pun, dipping their toe into the waters about how they want to regulate water. And look, I've got no complaints about that. We've got a compliance order, and we'll deal with it. We just have to do what they've asked. It's as simple as that.
Was there a thought, Mayor Lewis, that this could have been a bit of a ticking time bomb with the fact that you're sourcing water from the lake and its opportunity for all sorts of organisms to get in there?
No, when you look at our testing regime, so our E. coli, our coliform count, we're meeting the requirements, and there is an argument that our lakes, we're lucky in our source water that we've probably got some of the best source water in the country. Hence that that risk. If you look at the risk management side of things, we're in a better position than other councils when it comes to source water.
But the testing hasn't been specifically for
Cryptosporidium. So let's be clear. So the compliance order doesn't mention testing, because we are meeting the standards for testing. Cryptosporidium test in itself is a very unreliable test. It takes 3 days for a result to come. So even when you do get the result, it's a snapshot in time 3 days ago. And for it to make operational decisions based on that test, it has a very low value when making those tests. And when you look at the other tests, E. coli and coliform testing, that also gives an indicator of the same types of contaminants that you'd see Cryptosporidium to be introduced into water as well.
Mayor Lewis, is this embarrassing for the council, and how much damage does it do to our domestic and international reputation?
The risk of reputation, that is high on my mind. But the priority now is public health and the care of our visitors and our residents. That bigger picture about NZ Inc., yes, and then that flows on to a decision about how councils and how infrastructure is funded, especially given our council and our district has a very high proportionate number of visitors compared to our resident base and our ratepayer base. That is very much a live discussion I've had in the last year, and I think this episode has probably heightened that discussion even further.
Can you afford the $30 million that was mentioned, given your debt limit being very close?
Yeah, we recognise the debt limit, but the UV will get us, that will be the bridge to sorting out how we can finance the more permanent solution for that.
Why didn't you do the bridge earlier then for those 6 water supplies? Were we just crossing your fingers and hoping?
No, if you have a look at our investment plan over through the 10-year plan and the annual plan, they're all in there. So in the time that I've either been in council or looked or been involved with council, we've knocked off Arrowtown, we've invested in the shot over bores, we're engaged with Cadrona now to uplift their water supply, and then there's also other development agreements that we've got, let's say Kingston's coming at some stage, but we've got a work program.
For that Rolls-Royce models or for the UV, is what's in the long term?
Well, it depends on the source water. So for bores, it's easy to put the UV in, but if it's coming from the lake, because of, as Simon was saying, we've got the algae and the snow, those membrane filters are probably more of a more permanent option. Yeah.
If businesses are going to be required to supply people in hospitality, say, for months with water that's drinkable, who's going to pay for that? Will you roll out any funding for things like bottled water for hospitality businesses here?
So we're looking at the tanker option to bring that into the CBD. We've initiated the business response group that's having their first meeting today at 12:30, which we created during the pandemic. So that's happening today. So we will look at probably providing water at a source in town if that's what the businesses want.
Yeah, and have you got an update on cases today?
So that's one point I wanted to raise. We got a sit rep from Public Health late afternoon at 3. I think it was reported to 17. It's now 18. We'll get a further update midday today, roughly around midday. Yeah.
Should this investment have been prioritised earlier in the long-term plan?
So we prioritise based on, we've got, as you say, someone said, we've got 6 and we're just working through that 6. The priorities were based on the technical difficulties. We'd probably be able to learn from the other 4 before we get to the tough sites. And from what the officers are telling me, 2 Mile is probably the hardest site to deal with. So that's probably why it probably got pushed out to, well, it was on the plan for 2026 was the first initial investment. We just have to bring it forward.
And there's already a system in place in Kelvin Heights, but it's faulty or it's not operating properly. What's happened there?
I'll hand over to Simon. This one's all about technical stuff. This one.
Yeah, so happy to take that question. So Kelvin Heights does have a protozoal barrier. UV ultraviolet disinfections installed there. As mentioned earlier, turbidity affects UV. We've had very low turbidity of late, so that's not part of the issue. But the questions we have been raised by the regulator around some data anomalies. So we're seeing just some sporadic spikes in data that we believe are due to instrument malfunction, and they just want to work through the details of that, so they can have as much confidence as we do in performance of that treatment plant.
Simon, we've had quite a few people contact us asking about the big pipe leak up towards Fern Hill 2-3 months ago. And the question is that these water mains have to be really looked after and backflushed extensively. But we got the impression at that time that it was a major leak, it was causing traffic problems. Is there a risk that that job was rushed and somehow there was something that was missed in the back flushing of the water main at that stage?
So I think there's possibly 2 different events that we're talking about. So there was a significant failure of the rising main, which conveys water from our 2 Mile intake to the Fernhill number 1 reservoir. That was some time before any linkage to this outbreak. So very unlikely that there's a linkage there. Yes, it was urgent work, but our contractors are well aware of our hygiene expectations and confident that no shortcuts are ever taken on our water network.
So you've sought confirmation from them in terms of documentation that they did all the backflushing, etc., that they needed to do?
On that particular job, I haven't cited that myself, but the job that I think has been referenced on social media with linkages to the outbreak was actually a repair on a lateral that did affect Fernhill Road, but it was a 15 pipe and very minor.
When your whole network went down a couple of weeks ago, we saw sewage coming up through the station at Hanley's Farm. We saw Arrowtown completely cut off. Is there a risk that that complete communications network failure has somehow been linked to this outbreak?
No, the vast majority of our infrastructure and discrete sites operate autonomously. And so the main concern when we lose the communications network is our operators do not receive alarms. There are very few sites that rely on that communications network for communication.
But
it didn't operate.
It didn't work at that time.
In some instances, yes.
Yeah.
But for Fernhill and 2 Mile, there was no effect to that.
But for Hanley's Farm, it didn't work.
Correct.
Does that concern you? Could it be linked to this problem?
The Hanley's Farm overflow.
And the Arrowtown community being completely...
No, I have no concerns that there is any linkage between that communications failure and what we're seeing here at the moment. But certainly there's a very serious event and we're looking at how we shore up our communications network to avoid any reoccurrence.
And is there any concerns about the Hanley's Farm sewage leak, that there was some sewage that did go into the water supply and into the lake? Yeah,
so where that would have entered the environment was to the Kararo, far downstream of our 2 Mile tank. Again, no linkage.
Okay. So are there any clues as to what it could be? Obviously, you're looking at solutions now to make the water drinkable, but is there any council resource looking at if it is coming from the council water supply, how it may have got there?
Yes.
So I'll just jump in. Like the focus for council that I'm directing the council now is to comply with the compliance order. Whether there's a link to our water supply or not, for me that's irrelevant. I just want to get our compliant water into our system and back on track to where it was previously.
Did we get a cost for the interim solution, the UV solution?
No, so we're not in a position at the moment to comment on.
Ballpark, is it tens of thousands of dollars? Or
no, it'll be in the hundreds to millions.
Just with that one, since it's in the hundreds to millions, do you think it was an oversight to defer that $30 million from the 2021 long-term annual plan?
So yeah, the deferrals is a real tough one, especially for our council. I don't think a council of a ratepayer base that we have has probably faced you look at the leaky building frame that we've just settled and the pressures that's put on our finances. It's these tough decisions that we have to make, and now that this situation's come forward, I think myself and the councillors around the table are going to have to really sit down and reprioritise where we really invest our money.
Now, Lewis, obviously the recent rate rise was a bit of a load for people, and some people struggling to pay. And likewise, the chief exec, Mr. Teelan's pay increase. Is Mr. Teelan not supposed to be here today to talk to us?
Sorry, Mr. Teelan was he's on a holiday seeing his daughter get married that was delayed during the pandemic. So obviously, coincidence that he's away at the time, but he has been keeping a brief position.
I'm the acting CEO at the moment, so that's one.
And are the planned trips to Queensland still going ahead for Mr. Teelan?
No, he's not going to Queensland, only me now.
Neil Lewis, you touched on the pandemic just then. Does this bring back all those horrible memories of being in a pandemic-like mode now for the town?
It does, but in a way it's actually helped us deal with this now, because those structures we developed during the pandemic we've lifted and raised again. So it's actually helped us respond a lot better and a lot quicker than probably.
On that, so we are focused on the water supply question and answering that, but we also stood up a lot of staff around helping deal with business queries, residents' queries. So there's an whole organisation response to this that goes beyond just dealing with this question of water notes. It's about trying to deal with the businesses and everything else as best we can to provide the best information. So that's we're using that system that was set up through that emergency management as a structure for doing that. So that's how we're trying to get messages out to businesses, trying to make sure we've got good communications going out, trying to understand what's happening out there so we try and respond as best we can. So there's a lot more happening than just dealing with the water supply itself.
But with the structures in place, we've taken a lot of pressure off the technical guys just to focus on dealing with putting that barrier in place for 2 months.
There's obvious issues here for hospitality and the whole accommodation industry, but are you hearing concerns from other sectors of the community that it's causing significant difficulties?
Not at this stage, probably. Well, my main concern was obviously the hospital. So dialysis patients, people that need proper water for their treatment. So council's liaising with the hospital, they've seemed to have sorted that out. Their systems in place are working, and that's why we really want the Calvin Heights one to get online quickly as possible, because that's the airport, that's the hospital, that's a lot of supermarkets, most of their high school, a lot of primary schools. So
there's no capacity for that, like the press release last night or talked about you could either filter or switch to another source, but there's no way that Calvin Heights source could become an alternative source for us where it's only got a limited capacity.
Yeah, it's got a capacity for the network that it's connected to.
Right. So that's three your only option.
Yeah, we'd be bringing, I'd have to defer to Simon, but I can just imagine the size of the pumps and the size of the increase in the intake and all that would be,
Yeah, one of the key limitations is trying to get the water from Calvin Heights across to Queenstown town centre area is the capacity of the pipes and the pressure you need to operate them at. So no, it's unfeasible, unfortunately.
And one more question while you're there, you talked about not really the source not being a concern. I'm not a scientist, but say you put all these filters in, if it's already in the system, do you just flush it with chlorine to get rid of it? Or how do we know that it's not in someone's home pipe and is just going to come back in when you turn the systems back on? Or?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that water moves through the water supply scheme very rapidly. So, you know, we turn over the network kind of every couple of days. So water does not reside for a long time on the network. And one of the things we do need to work through with MRI in regard to separating the Calvin Heights from the 2 mile intake is just how we give them confidence that we've done that and flushed the potential 2 mile water out. I think saying that we have no concerns with the source, we're obviously looking very closely at our source water and running a heightened monitoring program, sampling those indicated in organisms like E. coli and photocomplex, as well as testing for Cryptosporidium.
When can we expect to have a confirmed time frame of when will be done?
So for 2 mile, 2 mile, I set up an instructor to the council to give me a time frame by the end of next week.
By the end of next
week, yeah.
Glyn Lewers, when the email came through raising the importance of this situation, it came through to the council the weekend, but the email was missed. Did you know that your systems were unmonitored over the weekend? So that was probably one of the first questions when I found out on Monday morning. We're working with Public Health South so that will not happen again. I would have expected some positive form of communication, as in a phone call or a follow-up to make sure we got the message. So there's always 2 parts of the communication, the sender and the receiver. So we're certainly looking at that now. Which email address did it come to? Was it sent? I wouldn't know which email address it came to, no.
Do you think council has to refocus on the basics rather than these grander projects that you've been working on?
If you could change the LGA, the Local Government Act, from wellbeing to core infrastructure, which seems to change with the change of government, that's probably the best answer I can give you. It doesn't matter what my personal view is, we just got to follow the Local Government Act.
But do you think some of those projects will be deferred just as a financial necessity?
Yes, we will have to defer those non-core. We will have to go, as people say, back to the basics of just water, wastewater, stormwater and roads.
Will you be approaching the government for financial assistance with it?
We'll have, it's probably a better way of phrasing that. Look, this opens up a whole question about Three Waters reform. I think there's a consistent view across all councils that there is a need for reform. The argument is what that reform looks like. And I think we've got a choice about that come October the 14th.
So have you asked for financial help?
Not specifically for this one. We're in a little bit of an uncertain period with the election at the moment. Yeah.
Can I just note, unfortunately, Simon's got to go. He's got to deal with the crypto outbreak. So a little more technical questions for Simon. I'll let him go to deal with it and we can carry on.
What's your surname, Simon?
Mason.
Mason.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Simon.
Is there any questions from online, maybe, that we can do? No, not at all. Okay. Other questions?
Sorry, I missed it. When are the results for your testing going to be available?
So we've had one Cryptosporidium result back late this afternoon, and it came yesterday afternoon, sorry, yeah, and it came back negative. But as I said, the test is an unreliable test because it's a snapshot of what was occurring on Monday. And it's an unreliable test. I've been told it's a 50-litre container of water taken out of Lake Wakatipu. So it's only a little small thing out of a giant lake.
So will you keep testing, or do you just?
Well, as we say, like again, testing's not the issue. It's the compliance with the protozoa barrier. So that's where the focus will be. We'll continue to meet our requirements for testing, and we have been, because if we weren't, it would be in our compliance order.
And so in theory, you could get another 5 compliance orders tomorrow.
But we've got no indication from the regulator that that's going to happen. We have very open communication with the regulator. They've been very helpful and very communicative with us, and they indicated that this compliance order was coming late yesterday, and they have given us no indication that there's any further follow-up on that.
So what's your overall message to businesses and residents then? Do you apologise to them?
We're working as hard and as fast as we can to get it back online as quickly as we possibly can. For residents and for everyone that comes to Queenstown, just follow good hand hygiene. That's probably the big one. Soap and water, 20 seconds, dry your hands. And boil your water, obviously. And the other one just escaped me. Oh, if you are feeling unwell, please go visit a medical professional. We actually do need people to go to the doctor and actually get tested, because that actually gives us a better scope of what the actual problem is out there with hard facts.
Hey, Lewis, just following up on Paul's question about the bigger picture. With the benefit of hindsight, do you think the council was too hasty to accept those shovel-ready projects that have subsequently gone over budget? And the second part of my question is this: does this development mean that projects like the arterial road, stages 2 and 3, and even a new headquarters of the council, that those have become less likely or may even be off the table?
So we're going through our long-term planning process at this point in time, and those discussions are live. And as I said before, we've got some pretty hard decisions to make and some prioritisation towards 3 waters. But then you've got to look at what's happening in the at central government level, depending on who gets in. We're in an uncertain time. There's 3 waters in and 3 waters out. So
is it a Prime Minister conversation or a Minister of Finance conversation or local government minister conversation? What level are you going to go to?
So this is that's a really good question. It's all of them, because local government touches on so many aspects of central government's regulatory framework that it's a discussion with all of them. And again, we're in that uncertain election time, so we're just going, I have to be patient, and it's quite hard for me to be patient, and I can tell you I'm not patient, so to actually drive this and just got to wait. Yeah.
But doesn't the buck stop at the council? I mean, we can talk about all these
instances. And Debbie, we own this. We've got to own this, and we are owning this, and we're going to get this done and fixed.
Just the size of the tanker you mentioned that you might be sourcing. What's the capacity of that?
Sorry, so we're going to go through, but we are looking at using some of the teams that used at events, which we can plumb into the main supply. We're looking at making a protozoa barrier in there. So still working that through. We've had offers from some other councils and mission management around tankering. We need to make sure we bring those in that they're located in places that are useful. But a key message from particularly residents and things is to carry on boiling your water, practice safe hand washing and those sort of things. We should also emphasise, of course, this applies to part of Queenstown only. So Lake has a state of the country, our town, Arthur's Point, and hopefully any area served by Kelvin Heights will be not have all of those in place. So it's arranged.
You simply suggested the Calvin Heights Street one could be quite so. What one thing here?
So we're working there, but our view is that that is a compliant system.
So that could be days.
Could be days, but we're working with the regulator around these, and Lewers did say we had conversations with the regulator, and that was really in the form of letting us know that this was coming to us. There was no real discussion around the nature of that, which we didn't try and interfere with that. It was just so we were slightly warned before it hit us at 5:30 last night.
Did you know the Calvin Heights protozoal barrier wasn't working adequately, or was it a surprise on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday? When did you figure this out, or was it you were aware of that last night?
In our view, it's always been compliant. There's been some, as Simon said, there's been some technical issues around some of the sampling, which no matter RFI want to look at, as we're looking at the moment. But in our view,
so how long have those anomalies been known about? Sorry.
Oh, I think the relay's been known about that for some time.
Sometime like months, weeks, days?
I don't know, sorry.
The level that they're talking about is we changed the sensor, there's a minute of data, not when we changed it, the minute there's a minute of data, we're saying the eddy current of the flow meter is not picking up the flows as they should. It's these high level technical stuff that is anyone that works with electronics and that type of monitoring equipment, they're really hard to dial down sensitivities in them. Yeah.
So just to say that I'm also worrying about some other aspects, but we're working through that with them to make sure that they're satisfied that we have a scheme that does comply. Our view is that it does. But
one other question you mentioned about a tanker. Again, excuse me, everyone's having to visualise, you have to bring water from out of town, but you're saying the tanker itself is a protozoa barrier, so it can have a constant flow of water from your mains.
Two things, a tanker that could be filled up from any of our compliance schemes. Right. And then there's I think it's a trailer that's used at events that provides fresh water which you can plumb into the mains. We still
that wouldn't run out because it would just be constantly.
Yeah, but we need to make sure that if we have that in the CBD, for example, that it's got a protozoa barrier and it complies with drinking water.
So that exists, it's an option.
Still working through. So
what's the message to people with holidays booked coming up in Queenstown?
Please come. It's many places in the world that have this sort of regime in place. It's not ideal, but Queenstown's still open and you'll still have an enjoyable time here.
And just on those tankers, sorry if I missed it, but do you have a time frame for when those will be activated and people can come and get water?
So the business unit's standing up at 12:30 today. That's their first meeting, so they'll probably direct us where they would be most useful. So timing wise, probably we don't have at this stage. We'll probably wait till after that meeting's held.
By tomorrow?
Well, not like I said, I don't know. Okay, all good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you for the time. Got any questions?